The search for Officer Luís Renato continued over the following days. Police examined every inch of alleyway 14. They dug through dumpsters, opened manholes, questioned residents, and called in reinforcements from other districts. But nothing was found. Absolutely nothing. Okay? It was as if Luís had never entered that alley at all. The footage from his body cam showed him vanishing in an instant, but the physical world offered no clues. The ground was untouched, the walls were clean, and the air was still. The case, officially designated as File 79, was becoming a void, an absence of answers that chilled even the most hardened investigators to the bone. Days after the disappearance, as the police presence began to dwindle, residents in the nearby buildings started reporting strange occurrences. Things that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Mice began with sounds, footsteps, slow, deliberate steps, echoing from inside the alley that the police had already sealed off with yellow tape. Some said they heard the metallic lid of a manhole shifting on its own in the dead of night, a grating sound that suggested something was moving beneath the city streets. Others claimed to hear a deep voice calling a name, but no one could ever quite make out what it was saying. It was a guttural, indistinct sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. One of the most intriguing testimonies came from the resident of apartment 3B, a man whose window looked directly down into the now infamous alley. He told investigators that on the night after the disappearance, he woke up suddenly with a distinct and terrifying feeling that he was being watched. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just paranoia from the events of the previous day, but the feeling was overwhelming. Finally, he got up and crept to his window, peering down into the darkness below. When he looked out, he saw something difficult to explain. The shadow of a man was standing in the center of the alley. It was a tall, lean silhouette, perfectly still, but the shadow, it didn't match the streetlight. The single lamppost at the alley's entrance cast long, sharp shadows, but this one was different. It seemed to move on its own, flickering and twisting in a way that defied the laws of light and physics. It was darker than the surrounding night, an absence of light that felt menacing and alive. He watched for what felt like an eternity before blinking, and when he opened his eyes again, it was gone. Another unsettling report came from a street sanitation worker who was doing his early morning route, sweeping the sidewalks near the sealed-off area. He said that while he was working a couple of blocks away, he clearly heard a loud crack coming from inside the alley. It wasn't a gunshot. It was sharper, more like a bone breaking or a thick branch snapping. He froze, listening intently. And right after that sharp sound, a muffled whisper seemed to travel on the wind, clear as day, saying, "Come back." The voice was low and raspy, filled with a strange sense of longing. He immediately walked over to the alley's entrance, peering through the police tape, his heart pounding. But the alley was empty, completely still. There was no one there. He reported it to the police, but with no physical evidence, it was just another strange story added to a growing pile. Meanwhile, forensic experts were going over the body cam footage with a fine-tooth comb. They analyzed the video frame by frame, looking for any sign of manipulation or technical failure. There was no glitch in the recording, no cuts, no digital interference. The timestamp ran continuously. The audio was clean right up until the moment it cut out, and there was no indication of any technical error whatsoever. The footage was intact. The file was pure, except for the 1-second interval where a living, breathing police officer simply ceased to exist on camera. One frame, he was there. The next, he was gone. It was a digital impossibility, a ghost in the machine that no one could explain. The file was a perfect recording of an impossible event. Faced with this inexplicable evidence, one of the most experienced investigators on the force, a man who had seen everything the city's criminal underworld had to offer, proposed a terrifying theory. He spoke about it in hushed tones, away from the official record. He believed that, for a brief, imperceptible second, reality itself had malfunctioned in that alley, as if something had distorted the very fabric of space and time, creating a void, a momentary rupture in the world as we know it. And in that single, broken second, Officer Luís Renato had been caught in the rift and disappeared. The theory was dismissed as science fiction by the higher-ups. But for the detectives who had watched the footage over and over, who had seen the impossible with their own eyes, the idea resonated with a chilling logic. Of course, the official version of the case, the one that went into the public record, was much simpler, much more palatable. The department concluded that Luís had fallen victim to a perfectly planned and executed ambush. He was captured without leaving a single trace. His body and equipment removed from the scene in a matter of seconds and taken to an unknown location. It was a clean, if brutal, criminal act. But that theory never explained the mountain of inconsistencies. It didn't explain the missing flashlight, which had its own independent power source and should have fallen to the ground. It didn't explain the gun that was never found, nor the empty holster. It couldn't account for the strange female voice captured on the audio just before the incident. It had no answer for the phantom call on the police radio that came after he had already vanished. It dismissed the shadow seen by the resident and the whisper heard by the sanitation worker. And most importantly, it could not explain the instantaneous disappearance recorded on camera. None of it matched a normal ambush. It was a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The most feared theory, the one whispered among officers late at night at the precinct, was different. It was the idea that alleyway 14 was never truly empty that night, that something or someone had called Luís there, something that interfered with his flashlight, something that could distort a video recording without leaving a trace, something not bound by the rules of our world. They talked about the history of the area, the strange stories and urban legends that had always clung to that particular part of the city. They wondered if Luís hadn't stumbled into a crime scene, but into a place that didn't belong to our reality. A place that was waiting. Months later, with the investigation stalled and public anxiety still high, the city decided to permanently close the alley. They didn't just put up a fence. They built a tall, thick concrete wall, sealing the entrance completely. They posted signs, warning of structural risk, to keep curious people and amateur ghost hunters away. Officially, the alley was a public hazard. Unofficially, it was being erased from the map. But those who live nearby, in the old apartment buildings that watch over that sealed-off space, know the truth. Even with the alley entombed in concrete, some nights still feel strange. Residents still report hearing things that no one likes to talk about. Faint sounds that bleed through the concrete and brick. Footsteps when there is nowhere to walk. Breathing when there should be only silence. And sometimes faint, indistinct voices. But the most frightening sound of all, the one that makes people lock their windows and turn up their televisions, is the faint, metallic scraping sound of the old manhole cover being pushed from below. A sound that makes no sense, because everyone knows the city filled in that entire section of the sewer system years ago. There's nothing down there anymore, or so they say. After years of fruitless investigation, the case of Officer Luís Renato was officially archived. No suspects, no evidence, no body, no trace. File 79 was closed, and Luís Renato remains a missing person to this day. Name in a file, a face on a poster, a ghost in a machine. This was File 79. Now, after hearing all the evidence, all the testimonies, and all the theories, I want to hear your opinion. What do you think really happened to Officer Luís Renato that night? Was it a perfectly executed criminal ambush, a masterpiece of stealth and brutality carried out by human hands? Or did he encounter something else in that alley, something that does not belong to our world? Leave your theory in the comments. I want to know what you believe still hides, even today, in Alleyway 14. I am the Hidden Archive. Thank you for your company, and I'll see you in the next mystery.